But what happens when you mine for gold in reviews?
Hopefully you find the right nuggets.
What's brand spend off? And we started to see differences, of course. And then we started to identify certain brand words that, wait a minute, when we had brand spend, they were doing better. Maybe we should start turning those back on.
Welcome back to Mobile Groove and the look at the 2026 Full Funnel Growth Series powered by Archie. Now, in this series, we've been talking about how growth changes when you stop thinking in a straight line. Nothing is linear. And you have to accept that the funnel is what your customers make it. They will come in and out of your app where they want. They'll connect with you any way they want. And that's why we have to start thinking about connected systems. And one of those systems that we look at a lot and think that it's by itself, it's top of the funnel, it's entirely its own dynamic. That will be the App Store. But is it that? Because yes, it's metadata, it's keywords, it's something you optimize, maybe also move on from there. But what if we're all wrong? What if the App Store is really mid-funnel or more? And what if you can learn a lot more from it as well? So these are important questions at a time when we have to do more with less. So we're looking at this topic and two brave people who've taken this leap, because I don't know that everyone would do this, right? Reframing the App Store from top of the funnel to full funnel performance. It's bold thinking. That's why I have to come to you. We have Hope Barrett, Director of Product Management for MarTech at SoundCloud. You are a bold woman, Hope. I've run into you several times, several panels. You're all about thinking about the growth stack, but evolving that thinking. And hey, SoundCloud, a global subscription business. So you have a lot to do and you've achieved a lot. So I'm so happy to have you on the show. We're so fortunate to have you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Peggy.
And of course, from the other side, because it's all about understanding the insights and how that works together in a full funnel model, we have Simon Thillay. He is head of ASO Strategy and Market Insights at AppTweak. And Simon, I've probably seen you everywhere at every conference since time began. You are the man at the intersection of ASO, Apple ads, and performance modeling. So again, so lucky to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I brought you two together on this show because you're doing something that others are not doing. You are rethinking. The both of you have been working together for several years, rethinking how SoundCloud should approach brand and performance, ASO and paid UA. So you've done it. First of all, it didn't start with a perfect model, but it ended up with some amazing outcomes, and starts with someone like you, Hope, asking the tough questions. So here you are. First of all, high five on your bold moves, because you didn't start SoundCloud as an AO expert. You came in there as relationship, lifecycle marketing. So when you step into this world of ASO where Simon lives and thrives, what did you find unfamiliar or even potentially challenging as you entered that territory?
So Peggy, as you mentioned, it was really a whole new world for me. So I have a very diverse background. I've done many different things. My degree is in chemical engineering. So I think that's important because it sort of cements the analytical mindset that I have. So it's like asking questions, it's being willing to test. So prior to SoundCloud, I was actually in news. So it's really doing life cycle, as you mentioned, in news. So looking at newsletters and looking how people respond to things. So coming to SoundCloud and working more in ASO, it was really research. It was like, what do I don't know, which was really everything, and where can I find it? So it was using a lot of the trade periodicals and just reading and being intensely curious. It was really finding great partners such as AppTweak, so I could learn from them. It was asking a lot of questions. I mean, I'm a news junkie, so I'm an information junkie. So if something is intriguing, if I read something anywhere, let's ask more about it. So that was really my mindset coming in, and it's really sort of a test and learn mindset. And fortunately at SoundCloud, we do have a test and learn environment. We do a lot of like stat sig testing, for example, and it was just a piece of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also what you need to be in this industry. When I talk with marketers and I talk with teams, it's like, what are you looking for? It's like just super curious, energetic. You cover that, but also the news junkie part. I just want to zoom in on that for a moment because then you think in headlines, right? You even delivered papers, not just write about them. Look at the headlines there as well. What headline shaped like how you wanted SoundCloud to show up in the App Store? You go after a goal, but you also have an idea of what it's going to look like when you get there.
I get probably about 500 emails in my personal inbox every day, and
Right.
most of them are newsletters and whatnot. So
Right.
I really honed in on finding out what's happening via headline. And a great headline, it's going to catch my attention and give me enough information so I want to learn more. And I think with the App Store, it's quite relevant, right? You want to catch someone's attention. You want to make it interesting enough where they're going to dig in and find out more.
Yeah, I could see that. So inbox zero is not going to happen, right?
Well, I mean, I go through everything every day. I mean, I there's some things it's also my to-do list, so it's not completely zero, but everything I get, I go through every day. So, yeah. But again,
Well,
I'm reading headlines, right? And which is again applies to the App Store.
well, it's true because you have to bring people in. It has to be attractive. It is also your brand. And this is interesting because maybe you intended to do this. I don't know, but you basically busted the biggest myth, which is like you do not turn off brand. But we'll get to that in a moment, what you did and how you did that. But this experimental mindset, it's saying to yourself, I'm sitting on a massive organic base. I have, it's SoundCloud. I have SoundCloud on my phone. I mean, it is well known. And then at some point you say, no, why are we paying for people who are already searching for us? So that's a bold question. That's a brave moment. Walk me through that moment and what happened when that moment came and what it triggered in your mind.
Yeah, so I think a part of it was actually led by our management team here. So, we had folks in management who are like exactly what you just said. We have a large organic base.
Yeah.
Why are we paying for people who are already intended on looking for SoundCloud? So even if someone else, some other company has a logo that looks a little bit similar or a name that sounds a little bit similar, if you're thinking about SoundCloud, you're not going to get, you're not going to get off sidetracked by something that looks similar. So that was sort of the thought. And, I think what happened is we ended up turning off brands. So,
Yeah.
We have, and internally we had been using like about 90% organic. So we're talking about super high organic, not like, 60 or whatever. So 90% organic. Well, what happens if we just turn off brand? And I think that was really the beginning of it. So, but again, it comes down to being able or being willing to test and see what happens. If you always have brand because you want to protect your turf and things like that, well, what happens if you turn it off? And that's what we did.
And that's exactly it, Simon. I mean, it's probably not something a lot of companies do, but from your side, you supported this. So brand goes to zero. What'd you think? Did you say to yourself, hey, great, someone is finally trying this? Or was it like, uh-oh, we need more data, better data to model this?
I think it's actually a little bit of both. Mostly because we had already theorized the part where some of your traffic from brand defense would essentially lead to paying for installs you'd expect coming organic otherwise.
Right.
And we had the beginnings of a model with what I would say were guesstimates. I think one project we did before Hope joined SoundCloud was trying to look at, based on who else was bidding on brand, what did we think was going to be the conversion differential? But that was very much making educated guesses as to how would a certain competitor convert if they were to gain the impression. And so when brand went to zero, there was excitement because it wasn't necessarily that we were certain that was the best move, but that was definitely the moment where, instead of being in this foggy area of estimating, guesstimating, and just trying to say, well, we see the direction. Now it was like, well, we have a couple weeks to analyze very specifically to say, we know this is when it happened. We can start making more precise incremental measurements and start going into this idea of what is the percentage of installs you lose, what is the percentage of installs you still have, and mostly how does that help us actually start coming up with math. At first, it's simply to say, well, the problem is not necessarily that you're paying for installs that would otherwise be organic. We've always had kind of this agnostic approach on the idea of it's never going to be black or white. It's always going to be gray. It's always going to be some of these installs. If you don't defend them, you're not going to receive them anymore. Some you would. And so the question was, can we start looking at brand as making sure we don't overpay, but always have efficiencies there, rather than think about it's always going to be a on-off topic, but
Mm.
we will never be able to just say there's a right price at any time of the year that is worth investing, because if we compare it to other campaigns, other channels, it is still going to be cheaper than what we would get elsewhere.
And that's something that marketers want to be looking at more. I mean, when you looked at the full funnel math here, what were some of the estimates? I mean, what is it that you can say continues the conversation? Because most teams, they would say, okay, the estimate is maybe some like 90%, for example, and that would shut down this conversation in most companies. But that wasn't the case here.
I think part of it comes from the fact that uh, the price of Apple ads is sometimes discussed without much depth. I think you easily get into conversations with marketers who will either tell you, "Oh, we find that Apple offers some of the cheapest CPIs, and we're happy with that," and some others who will tell you, "Oh no, actually for us, like we don't do brand, and we see CPIs are much higher than other networks. We'd rather like Apple will at best be towards the lower end of our media mix." And for us, it's always been about there's there's so much inventory available that yes, some of it can be extremely competitive, but you can find some that is still cheap and still makes sense for your app. And also, you have to realize that the bid is not the only success factor in Apple. And I think that's really the part where I get to put on my ASO hat. But it's to explain that when Apple presents the reality of the auction being a second price bidding auction, there is somewhat of a myth that needs to be busted, because people assume that just means highest bidder win and paid whatever the second highest bidders gave as their bid plus 0.1. To be perfectly clear, this is nothing Apple has ever stated publicly, nothing they have told me or AppTweak. It's pure observation that have led us to explore this route. And it's been to say, well, we see that you don't always need to have the highest bid to actually win the auction. In a way, it makes sense because Apple will only make you pay for taps, but what they're actually selling are impressions. And so what they need to look at is not just your bid, but also your tap through rate. And so to tie it back to the brand issue, you have that problem of, do I want to bid on my own brand? But at the same time, if I do, even if I put a very low bid and
Put the price up.
you have such a better tap through rate anyway. If
Yeah.
your tap rate is 5 times that of any competitor attacking your round, that means that they're gonna need to put much higher bids than you just to get that share of voice. And even if we were to assume that very high cannibalization and 90% of those tabs that we now pay for are actually tabs we would still have gotten. The answer is yes, but if you get to pay for them, if it's a tenth of what you would pay for any other install, the math still math, basically.
Okay. I get it, because it's not just seeing the ad, it's interacting with it. And that's going to happen when you have the brand, when you have that performance anyway. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Absolutely. And
Uh-huh.
and then moving away from the idea of optimizing, like having that cost simply at the install level, because I think one of the other challenges you get from working around Apple Ads is that
Mm-hmm.
in the Apple Ads console, what you get to measure are simply cost per tap and cost per acquisition is a word from Apple. Cost per install is what most listeners will think about. You don't really have those post-install events baked in, but we know this is where the real value happens for our clients, for SoundCloud with subscription, for various events depending on business models. What we relearned after our first round of experiment with SoundCloud was also looking not just at what would be the ratio of installs that we would not lose from any interruption, but how do these installs specifically turn into retained users, turn into subscribers? Even if you don't like running it, you should, is that a lot of times people who search for your brand specifically are still more likely to bring you the best lifetime value compared to people you acquire through other means, through other intent, where you have a shot at converting them, but sometimes you haven't been clearly given the opportunity to know, are they aware my business is subscription based, for instance? And so at some point, if people want to listen to music for free, they have SoundCloud as an option, but they won't get the full value of SoundCloud. And so those will, as a result, usually be people harder to convert to subscribers, even though we show them the value. But simply at that point, it becomes more interesting to potentially go back to investing a bit more on brand than on keyword that drives traffic, but that drive lower intent, at least when it comes to the eventual value and monetization of the app.
Because they're discovering that along the way, that intent will be very low, whereas it'll be higher if they understand this. And that's where brand comes in. And Hope, I mean, it really was a debate, I would imagine, because you didn't get involved in that debate. You made it a performance question. It was never the way that you framed it, wasn't, are we cannibalizing organic? And I want to understand how you framed it, and how you managed to sort of flip the script on this, because normally you wouldn't recalculate it through this brand lens. You would see it almost like a moral debate.
Yeah. So as I said, we turned it off. That was the first thing that we ended up
Yeah.
doing. And then after doing that, we started to look at what terms that were driving traffic, what's brand spend off, and we started to see differences, of course. And then we started to identify certain brand words that, wait a minute, when we had brand spend, they were doing better. Maybe we should start turning those back on. As Simon mentioned, we started to see a little bit of spend was being, multiplied. So it was a multiplier effect. A little bit of spend, we were getting much better results than not spending at all. So that's essentially sort of how the process progressed for us.
I like that approach, because when you think about it, there is so much packed into brand at the start. So if you just like turn it off, clean slate, right? And then you can do the test of, well, let's turn this back on, see what happens. Oh, something happened, something didn't happen. But you can sort of peel it back, because brand is very complex, like an onion. You peel back, and then you try layer for layer, and then you are validated in what you are doing. That is right. You see the conversation going to retention, subscriber value. You start to see what role the store really plays. I mean, what was your lesson here for understanding the store? Also, what marketers should think about when they're rethinking whether or not to take this chance?
It's so important to like challenge your perceptions, to test and learn, right? So I not necessarily take anything for granted. And sure, there may be evidence of something is right, but the environment is very dynamic. It's always changing. So, even if something worked last year, it's still a good opportunity to test it this year, because again, it's a very fast moving space. There's a lot of different things that are published, and thinking about how does it apply to me.
And this experiment, this continues, right? You didn't just do it, set it, forget it. You continue to see this and to experiment with it and to find out what's working, what's not. You don't turn it off and leave it, right? So you're still on this project, so to speak, maybe just deeper in it.
Yeah, so we definitely, we've been working with AppTweak for many years at this point. And really, we have a great team there. So a lot of it is relying on AppTweak to help us with some of these things. I mean, I think from a thought leadership perspective, really understanding where they're coming from, and AppTweak listening to our concern, right?
Mhm.
So when we first came and said, hey, we want to turn off brand, they could have told us we're crazy, but they were also willing to entertain that and help us through that, where I think we both came away with great lessons learned.
Want to go to that, Simon? I mean, there are a lot of lessons here. I mean, truly a lot. I mean, you could do us all a huge service by just capturing this one chapter of what you've been doing. But the lesson here and what you think has become what ASO is within this framework, because at one level, the lesson is be brave, turn it off, see what happens. But there's a very methodical approach you've taken here. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit and bring that back to the whole idea of, yes, the App Store is not just top of funnel.
I think what made it easier for a company that started in ASO to come up with a model for brand defense that would really figure out where are the best possible optimization. And as Hope mentioned, these keep evolving because Apple Ads worked as an auction system. So whenever someone joined the auction, some things can change. But what made it possible at first, I think, was also just uh, never being comfortable with the reality of attribution. I think a challenge that's always harder on fellow ASO practitioners and a lot of performance marketers is that we never know what is the exact number of installs brought by organic because we don't have a real definition of organic. MMPs will say organic for whatever they call unattributed. And in fact, something I've been working on a lot this past year has been the challenge of how if you start looking at ASO as a fuel to your growth engine rather than a specific gear that you turn on or off, the challenge you get there is that ASO can help other channels, but if, for instance, anyone is seeing ASO is measured as the organic from an MMP, then in practice, helping other channels becomes detrimental because suddenly you're going to get people to start being attributed. You're helping more people be attributed. And for the company as a whole, that is great news. But that's where I'm always preaching how I think companies need to stop pitting ASO teams against other teams in the idea that it's a competition for who brings what percentage of users, and rather look at this thing because even the idea of people searching for in the app store, the reality is we see today, I think, the vast majority of the top search terms in the store are branded. And we know that these brand searches, they don't start out of nowhere. Someone hears about a brand, sees a
Yeah.
brand campaign somewhere, hears a friend talk to them about this cool new app. And so you can't ever think, oh, we created search. The biggest challenge with search, whether paid or organic, is that there is a very large pool of inventory, but also you can't just multiply 2x, 3x that amount overnight. It takes more effort. And so, with that in mind, you can start also looking at how people may arrive on the store, search for something, may browse on the store. Some people also land directly on your app page. But interestingly enough, there is never 100% of these people who convert and who download your app immediately. If you have 100% conversion rate on that funnel, I would either want to know your
Yeah.
magic recipe or congratulate you on presenting your app to your family, because I think it's just the first 5 users who will get you that kind of conversion rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, from then on, it basically ASO is fighting also. Like, I don't look at it's just gonna be search or it's just gonna be editorial. It's more about whoever arrives on the store, what is a battle I can fight to try and make sure that they feel like whatever is they're actually interested in is available. And so that's where we've had many experiments around custom product pages, custom store listings, and more. But these have all made us look at it as we will only work well if we collaborate with the various teams that all drive acquisition, instead of just thinking we are here to bring extra installs and claim that we are responsible for a slice of the pie.
Make me think back to a time when we met, Simon, many years ago, but I think it was something in there. And I remember chatting with you at the time, will we get to a point where we start to see ASO for what it is, which is that fuel, right? And we were even chatting, will there ever be such a thing as a chief ASO officer? Because if it goes across the organization, if it goes for you, Hope, across SoundCloud, that is the question. It's not just in one place. I'm just curious how you've handled that in your own internal structure.
Sure. So I would say that SoundCloud, our performance marketing team, does user acquisition and ASO and all that together. So I think that helps because it's not an internal battle. It's more so thinking about it holistically. So I would say that's one step. We have great people, very talented people looking at this, asking questions. I think, again, that's key, is being able to ask questions and testing, preconceived notions about what is happening and whatnot. I think a lot of what Simon just said really resonates with us because we are challenging our attribution perceptions today. So, and a lot of it is out of like just testing. Like if we move spend around and we see shifts that are larger or less than we thought, well, why is that? We've been working to really hone in on our attribution. So adding new tools that get us closer to where we are. We're starting to think about our model. I mean, typically we use a last click model, but starting to think about, well, what if we don't? What other models are out there that would better, characterize our journeys for our users?
That's exciting that you're taking it on, Hope. It makes me wish we'd have another show at some point, because that is the question, right? What are we really seeing? What is the data really telling us? Also, you've worked together, the both of you, in looking at those reviews differently, using the user language, their wording, their expression to power a strategy, Simon, because you're looking at it as the ASO expert. Hope is, of course, operationalizing that. But what happens when you mine for gold in reviews?
Hopefully you find the right nuggets. We kept seeing this part of the industry saying, oh, user reviews are gold. And this idea of you have great user reviews that can feed conversion, because someone seeing a positive user review at the right moment is exactly the nudge they need to actually be convinced to download an app. But sometimes it's also your users are speaking to you, they're telling you what you can fix, what you can improve. And sometimes it turns out they can even tell you or tell others, but in the process, let you know why they think your app is better than everyone else's.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
and so we had this data science project of trying to sift through reviews. In the process, we also realized if reviews are a gold mine, there's very much a mining process that's needed because we sifted through the reviews of various apps. One of them was Spotify, and this was already uh, a good 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember we saw that in just 1 month, the amount of words that were generated in the reviews of Spotify was more than the first two Harry Potter books. And
Whoa.
to be
Okay.
honest, it's not the same quality with all due respect to Spotify and their users. But that meant there was a lot to dig through. But this is where AI, and I think when we started, this was before ChatGPT had
Oh,
really
yeah.
to a point where it would be very strong. But
Mm.
uh, we're definitely using various AI technologies. We've been able to get to that point, and when we hit that sample of reviews that told us, oh, some SoundCloud reviews are mentioning better than Spotify because we literally just said, well, these people are doing the marketing for us. So we
Yeah.
just took that learning, put it on the custom products page, and then use Apple Ads again, this time when going after Spotify, when going after other competitor brand terms, and just show them this is what makes SoundCloud better. And we did see a significant improvement in performance from the campaign, and we calculated at some point that given the improvement in conversion, had we not done that CPP, getting the same amount of installs would probably have costed 49% more budget, I think. Between
Wow.
40 and 50, I think was the number.
Okay.
So it really helped us frame it also as you can go full circle from those users most engaged with your product and happiest with your product will tell you how to market it. And then you can market it to others and you can go back to measuring a clear ROI for how much does that cost if you're not doing that.
Well, it's all signals, right? It's about capturing that signal. And that's what you did, Hope. You took this, you look at it, you listen, you learn from what your loyal users are saying, and you put that back into the custom product page, back into the creative. Tell me a little bit about what happened when you launched it.
Yeah, so I would say SoundCloud, we have a very passionate user base and we see
Yeah.
it all
Right.
over the place. And we essentially have two audiences. We have our artists that, we're helping them make a living. So obviously they're very passionate there, but we also have listeners and people who might be coming to SoundCloud to discover the next artist or listen to DJ mixes that they can't really find anywhere else. So there's a lot of passion there. And yes, we were using what users are telling us for our CPP or custom product pages, our CPP, but we also do that in other places. So of course, product, and if someone's talking about a product change, I would like to see. We internalize that, of course, but just like what people are, what resonates with people. We actually use this in social media, like paid social as well. So it's something that we're used to doing. So I think for us, it wasn't so much like a revelation, other than this is another surface where we need to keep testing. So we have users saying certain things about SoundCloud, like this test, see what does this, and then I think that's really our approach to it.
So let's stay there for a moment because there's a level of discipline here and also, frankly, Hope, level of grit, because custom product pages, they're testing all the time. But you have to have a culture that says, hey, let's do this, let's test this, let's listen to this, let's put this into our CPP, let's put this into our social media, paid social, let's use this. How do you build that culture? How did you build it, or what helps you make that possible?
I mentioned early on that, we use StatSig all the time for testing. I mean, we're like in Lifecycle, we're always thinking about, ABN tests and like just trying to figure out what converts the best. Something that I did say initially, for our performance marketing, I mean, we really are we're really honing in on cost per acquisition. So because of that, we're really honed in to what performs the best. And when you think about testing, that's one great way to get to that answer. So it's our mentality and our approach at SoundCloud, and then finding people who fit that, who agree with that, who are curious. I mean, a big part of testing is someone who is curious and asking questions of whatever they're doing. And we've built teams that do that.
I think what's also really, really key here, and for our audience as well, is if you start to treat this all as intent layer, as signals, you're not just optimizing campaigns, you're optimizing the narrative. And so, Simon, for teams who are looking at sort of ASO the way it used to be, they're seeing it as metadata, basically, assets, metadata. What are they leaving on the table? What do you tell them? What do you bring up and show so that we understand that those assumptions about the role of ASO and also the role of the App Store, that needs a rethink?
The first approach is show them the human story. A few years ago, Instagram was not doing any effort when it comes to ASOS. They've changed that since. I remember showing both internally when onboarding people and getting them to kind of see where we were going with how we wanted to present ASO, and externally, like showing people what was back then the store page of Instagram, and telling them if this app was not pre-installed or on your phone, or if you did not know exactly what it does, would you download? And kind of making sure that before we go into the technicalities of what does ASO bring, what are the metrics specifically, the first situation is just bringing it back to, you are trying to bring science to what is human life, which is chaotic. And so you have to bring it back to the human experience of, at the end of the day, the store is biggest bottleneck there is in the acquisition funnel. It's that moment when, whether people are going to take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to scroll through everything there is on your store page to make a very informed decision, or what a lot of people do, which is spend 3 seconds. It's all about, even in just 3 seconds, not everyone goes with the, I know what this is, I will download it immediately. There is always someone who will just have that uh-oh moment. I'm not sure, I'm going to check. And so bringing it back was to say, the first thing you need to consider is just, is the story, does the story fit the intent? Are people seeing something that will encourage them in what they expected to see, or will they see something unexpected? And if so, is that going to be something good because it's something more, or is that going to be something where it starts creating doubt? Because you know that when people go to the store, they want to download something. Sometimes they don't know what, but when you open the App Store, it's not, I don't think it's just to see what's going on in the world. It's usually because you're thinking, I might want to download an app about something. So you have that level of intent that's clear, but you also don't have necessarily, just because someone wants to download doesn't mean they know what exactly they want. And sometimes they're just getting there, seeing what it looks like, and say, actually, for actually no.
Mm-hmm. And you bring it full circle there, because that's just it. When I go there, it's also helpful if, when I am there, that what I'm seeing resonates, right? And you get that from understanding what other users are saying. And so it's closing that loop. And in closing that loop, that's what we look at also in the playbook, because we're looking at the full funnel, about closing that loop. So what I love about this conversation is it challenges a lot of our assumptions, but it also opens up some opportunities, because if we start to look at things full funnel, it doesn't always mean adding more channels. It probably means also adding more depth. And that's what you've done. And that's what we also explore in the ARCHI full funnel growth playbook, where you, Simon, and AppTweak also, you share insights, some surprising data points as well. And all of this comes together because signals that connect acquisition to retention, using insights to power creative, to power, in this case, CPPs, that's what amplifies the value that users also value. So as we close, I just want to zoom in again to look at how your thinking has changed, because this is going on for years, right? You're thinking about brand, performance. I want to zoom in on how your thinking has changed, because brand and performance, we're talking about it now more than ever. So, Hope, what was the most interesting, surprising when you turned off brand? And now, when you think about it,
The most surprising part was when we turned brand back on. So it was really looking at the multiplier effect. When we started to inject a little bit of spend and seeing the outsized result, I think that was really the most interesting. And it really started to make us think more about the value of brand spend. So, taking a step back from ASO specifically, we've started to think about what does brand spend look like in other parts of our marketing efforts. And for example, October of 25, we actually started to do some brand spend tests again. So I think that's sort of one of the lessons that we pulled from our ASO experiments, but also how we used it in other places. And then I would say the last piece of that is really thinking about our attribution and how all the different parts of what we're doing, how they interact and affect each other. So that's essentially the learnings, brands, spend, and the importance it can have, but also understanding, attribution as best we can in perfect world.
so that's it, learning from there, applying it to the future. And that's just it, the future of ASO, Simon. You're the one to discuss this, because we looked at the App Store as top of funnel. We understood it as that. But now that we realize and we can agree that it is more than that, what's the most misunderstood or maybe underutilized metric in ASO today? Because it does play a bigger role. So what aren't we grasping?
I'm tempted to try a different way of going full circle as well by saying maybe search impressions and specifically things like keyword volume, in the sense that what's interesting is that we have seen last year Apple also release what AppTweak actually measured as the biggest algorithm change we ever detected in the US.
Wow.
The Play Store is not is also concerned here because Google has been introducing a lot of AI technology. Guided search is something I encourage everyone to learn about. But essentially, what that means is we're seeing both stores with the whole wave of AI technology are also going back to rethinking what search means. And what's interesting is now I feel like keyword volume is interesting, not so much in the idea of are you going to be able to match your text metadata with a specific keyword. This is exactly what is not as easy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But information of seeing now as groups of keywords which are going to be searched at what time, and essentially starting to see again how these connect back to intent. And it's not just about, or can you position ASO as a way to generate extra installs in itself? Can you use ASO as fuel for the other channels, but rather now also looking at it as when ASO is able to give you these signals, are you able to connect them directly to your other channels and say, well, the way we're going to be relevant for a certain intent is by making sure that we make our app relevant in the store, but also that we know if someone is searching for a specific kind of intent in the store, it means someone is not yet thinking about it, but whenever they go in social media, whenever they go in other apps and are exposed to different types of paid UA creatives, that's also going to resonate with them. It's basically looking not just at what do we know users already say about the app, it's also when we see people search for something new, how does it relate to our app? How can we use this to market our app better? Because more story to be found from actually understanding what people are interested in.
Absolutely, because it will go around in that full funnel, in that full circle, because that is where the brand is being discussed. That's how it's being discussed. App Store, off App Store, and probably in the future, and we won't get to that this time around, but you touched upon it yourself, Simon. AI, I'm asking more frequently now. I need an app that does XYZ. I'll look at the results. I know that it's AI and I know that it's not going to give me entirely what I want, but it does give me a direction to start. So that becomes also very interesting as well. The intent of the user, but how does AI pick up on that?
For me, absolutely. We'll definitely have extra insight to bring in a few months.
Good. We will be here because that playbook is coming. That's why we have this series looking at the full funnel growth playbook, 2026 full funnel growth playbook. Also, AppTweak, a partner with Archie and other companies in this series. We'll have more. We'll have it all in the show notes, and we'll have tons out there promoting it on social media and elsewhere as well. And Hope, I just want to thank you for your time because you are a pioneer in a way. And I think we're very, very lucky to have a look into your thinking because that thinking informs your decisions now, should be informing marketers' decisions coming in the future as well. So thanks again for sharing.